Good morning. That was quite a long introduction. I hope you didn't get bored listening to all that. Well, actually, I met Dr. Ramcharan so many years ago, and then we connected recently on Zoom, and he told me that I'm going to really grill you, so I'm very scared. But anyway, starting with the HCL, what I'd like to mention is that we started out in 1975-76 time frame. And I'm talking about a time frame where India was a very small little country. Many things were unknown about us. And it was a very tough environment. The year we started, emergency had been called in. And we were, had many issues to handle. We all, 6 of us, were working with a very large company called DCM. And we all decided to leave because we found that we were a small little cog in the wheel somewhere. And DCM was so huge, we were a very small piece of that. And whenever we ran into cash flow problems, there was really no help. So at some stage, we took a decision that we had actually started working on making a computer in DCM. And so at some stage, we took a decision that microprocessors are just making their appearance. Why don't we just take the microprocessor and do something about it? So we decided that all computers till then were huge. They would occupy a room like this you had to take off your shoes and you had to walk into places like that. Those kind of computers were there. IBM used to sell old products here. HCL was there. And they were all large computer companies. So we decided that let's make the computer from a microprocessor. Those days, there was nothing called a startup. And when we went to the government, we had to go to the government if you wanted to start any business in the country. Those days, it was a license Raj. So when we went to the government, they said, "We don't know you. Who are you?" So we said, "We're a bunch of young engineers who've left DCM. We used to work for a large company. And we have this vision of making computers in India." By the way, there were only 100 computers in the country then. So we said, okay, it's a huge market with just 100 computers. So we went to the government. We got no answer. We actually got an answer to say, we will not be able to give you a license. So we said, okay, let's do something different in the meantime. So we started a little marketing company. And what we did was that we used to, those days in DCM, manufacture and market calculators. And those days, calculators were this big and priced at 10,000, 15,000 rupees. So we said, since we know this business, why don't we just go and pick up from someone else and market them in the meantime and create some cash flow? Because all we had when we started was a princely sum of 1.86 lakhs. That's what we started with. So we went to a company called Televista. And they had developed a calculator. They were not really be able to market it. We picked it up from them. And we did a deal. We said, look, we're just starting out. We can't pay you immediately. We need a 60-day credit. Since we knew them in some manners, they agreed to do that. And so we started marketing. And what we used to do was to actually sell the calculators in 15 to 20 days. And we had credit of 60 days. So we could turn around the product quickly. Many years later, a great company called Dell came up with this whole idea of negative cash flow. We were doing negative cash flow in 1975. So with that, we started the business of marketing. And in the meantime, we were still not giving up the whole idea of making computers. So we still wanted to somehow find a way to get a license. We discovered that the UP government was sitting with a license. So we went up to them and said, look, you guys have a license, you've not gone forward, Why don't we join hands? We will do all the marketing, we will do all the manufacturing, and we'll give you 26% equity. And with that agreement, we formed what is those days was called joint sector company. And that was one of the early days when joint sector companies were created. So we got the license. And once we got the license, we started working on few people from R&D in DCM. We pulled them out because we had told them that, guys, when we get started, we will pull you in. So we also gave them equity when they came in, 2 of them. And so from 6 founders, it became 8 founders because R&D was absolutely essential for us to actually design and make computers. Having got the license, we started to look at how should we name the company. And naming the company is something that I always tell my startups. I've actually invested in about 70, 80 startups. And I always tell them the name is very important. So we wanted to get the name Hindustan. We were very clear we wanted India in our name. And having figured out that we needed Hindustan in our name, we talked to ROC and everybody around in the government, and they said, you can't get this name because this is always given to public sector or large companies, like Hindustan Lever, etc. We didn't give up. We somehow managed to get the name Hindustan. Now, that turned out to be a great decision because when my sales guys used to walk into any account or any customer, the name Hindustan was very attractive. They used to think, oh, this must be a big company. We were just starting out. It looked much larger than life. And so that's how our journey of Hindustan Computers Limited started. Can I get some water, please? So that's how we started. And then as we started designing our first product. Thank you so much. We started designing our first product. And the first product that we decided to do was, can you imagine, a 4-bit microprocessor based on Rockwell chip. And we designed our first scientific and engineering computer. Why did we take that decision? Because we felt that engineering scientific people will have a lot of allegiance to young engineers who had just started a company. So we started designing the product. It was in our labs, but we just didn't have the cash flow to last another year. So what do? So we did something audacious. This is something I'll talk about again and again in HCL story. That we went to IIM Calcutta and we said we want to hire 8 people out of here. Because we wanted the best people to be our sales organization. When we went to IIM Calcutta, we made a presentation to them, said this is what we are starting and this is what we want to do. This is what our vision is. We want to change the world using a microprocessor. So after the presentation, all the students walked up to us and started asking a lot of questions. Said, look, you are a bunch of young people, you've just started out. How do we take the risk of joining you? So what we said was, look, we are not offering you a job. We are offering you an adventure. And we also said, we'll pay you the highest salary in the country. The highest salary those days, can you imagine, was 2,000 rupees a month. But we did that. We took that risk. All of them were paid more than what we were drawing. And they agreed to join. So getting the right people into the company was a very critical aspect of our success. The second thing that we did was that as we were selecting people for sales, we would use certain strategies for hiring them. And we were looking for specific qualities in people. And what was that quality? We were looking for need for achievement. There's McLennan's theory which says you have need for achievement, need for power, need for affiliation. So if you can test people for need for achievement, then you'll get the right people who would actually be great salespeople and leaders tomorrow. So that's what we did. Having done that, that, product was not yet ready. So how do we sell a product that's not there? We decided we will sell the product even if it's not there. So we created a beautiful brochure of the product, what it will look like, what the specifications will be. And with that, we trained the salespeople to go and market it all over the country. Go to engineering colleges, research institutions, and appeal to them and say, we're just set up this organization, we are a bunch of young engineers, we want your support. So one of my co-founders, Arjun Malhotra, he said, don't worry, I'll go and get the first deal. So he goes to IIT Kharagpur, which was his alma mater, and he gets the first deal without a product, just on a brochure. And then all the salespeople picked up that deal, went all over the country and made sales. And the sales happened. So I don't know of any other company that's actually sold products without a product. That's HCL. Having done that, we started to get into commercial market, and we started to design new products. Let me tell you one thing. Those days, no imports were allowed, no designs you could buy. You had to do everything yourself. So we designed it ground up. We made the hardware, we made the operating system, we wrote our own compilers, we wrote our own relational databases, everything we wrote. Today, in this country, everybody imports. Sadly, that whole thing has been lost. Anyway, that's a different story. So anyway, having done that, we started to work on our commercial computer, and we launched it in a very big way. And we figured out that there were a lot of myths about using computers. People were never buying computers those days. So we had to literally create the market. And how do you create the market? You find out what people think about the product. Why do people not buy computers? So we figured that out, and we said, we'll crack this myth. So our first ad, that was a full-page ad, said, even a typist can operate. And that's how we cracked the market. And then we discovered that people thought it was very expensive. So we went to IDBI, did an agreement with them, and brought EMI to the country. First time EMI was being used. So we said, this is the price that you have to pay as a down payment, and then you pay over the next few years. With that, we really opened the market up. It was a tough job, but we did it all over the country. And slowly, we started to grow. Somewhere around 1980, we met some people from Singapore, and they said, come and set up manufacturing in Singapore. So off we went to set up manufacturing of computers in Singapore. Those days, even software companies had not reached Singapore. As a hardware company, we were there. And over the next 10 years, we kept introducing new products. And there was intense competition. It was not that we were born without any competition. Day one, we had competition. And I always say that when you have competition, you have a much bigger market. Market expands. So in 10 years, we became India's #1 IT company. So it's a 10-year period, which was a very fast growth for us. Why were we successful those days? Because we were doing things differently. We were actually creating the market. And whenever you are creating the market, you can be a leader. So I think that's how we became a very good leadership company those days. Coming to 10 years, Singapore, et cetera, somewhere around late 80s, we started to develop in India a most amazing product. We were using something called the Unix operating system, which was defined as a standard by all banks by RBI. We went and bought the source code for Unix. We converted that into a commercial product because Unix was a scientific engineering operating system. And then we designed a multi-processor, fine-grained Unix product. A lot of you will not know that. But what it basically means is that you'll get great performance. For those days, there were only single processor products. When we had that product, suddenly one day, McKinsey wanted to enter the country. So McKinsey came to us and said, you are the largest computer company in India. We'd like you to be our first customer. Well, we said, look, we can't afford you. They said, no, 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 we'll do it pro bono. So McKinsey came up with this whole idea that they will examine what all we are doing, what are our strengths, and they said, we'll give you an entry strategy for the US. Great. Computer company, hardware company, entry strategy into the US. So they gave us this great strategy. They said, your product is amazing. You can be extremely successful. Why don't you set up a plant in America? So that's like taking coal to Newcastle. Anyway, we went and had the guts to set up a manufacturing plant in Silicon Valley. And few of us moved there, few of the promoters and directors. And we all moved there, and then they started to work on marketing the product. We got great deals, and we discovered that, yes, there was nothing like this available. So we got a very large deal from one customer, and then, unfortunately, that customer got bought over by another company, and the deal went away. So here we are. We had borrowed 5 crores from ICICI Bank. We had set up a manufacturing plant in America, and we were really floundering. Because the other problem that we discovered, which McKinsey had not seen, was that we needed a certification for our product from the US government for our power supply, which meant that a certain amount of frequency has to be there. So with these two problems, literally our manufacturing stopped, our business stopped. So what do? And that's what happens with a lot of startups. They run into an issue, they've decided on a MVP, they're actually deep into it, and suddenly nothing is available. The market is not there. So we pivoted. And that's what a lot of startups do today. Those days, it was unknown. So what do? Pivot. When you pivot, you look at adjacencies. What is adjacent to you? What is the knowledge that you have? What is it that you can do? So we decided that let's move into, we have a great engineering team, great R&D team. We started placing our R&D engineers into R&D pieces of large companies like Hewlett-Packard. And we went to them and said, look, this is the technology that these guys have developed. This is our capability, and we would like to work in your R&D. So somewhere we placed 10 people, somewhere we placed 15 people, and so we pivoted from being a hardware company to an engineering software company. So that sort of got us going those days. Coming back to India, we were going along very, very well, and then, of course, suddenly there was no foreign exchange in the country. So, this is what happens to a lot of companies. You go through valleys of death, and you need to figure out how to get out of them. So we were literally in that situation. And at that stage, something interesting happened. Hewlett-Packard bought a company called Apollo, and we were manufacturing Apollo workstations in India. So Hewlett-Packard wanted to set up their manufacturing and start marketing in India. So we went to them and said, you bought Apollo, we already manufacture Apollo, we are a large company, why would you want to start on your own? Convince them to form a joint venture with us. And that's how we actually recovered from that horrible situation of not having foreign exchange. And we became a company called HCL Hewlett-Packard. And till then, HP had only sold about 100 computers in India. In the first year itself, in our relationship, we sold 100 computers. Anyway, that's how we started going. And as we discovered in those early days that depending just on import components and depending on dollars is not a good idea. So we started to very seriously work on our software business. We had started that with engineering software. And we took out the R&D of my company, which was HCL, Hewlett-Packard, took that R&D and made it HCL Technologies. We called it Technologies because it was a technology business. And that HCL Technologies, then we decided to add more software. And those days, Wipro, Infosys, all these guys were far ahead of us. But we said, we need to be in software because we just can't be dependent on imports. We need to balance the two. With that idea, we created HCL Technologies. And somewhere around 99, 2000, we sort of realized that if we want to become big and want to overtake a lot of the companies that already existed in software, the only way to do it was to go for an IPO and acquire companies after the IPO. So we decided to do an IPO in New York Stock Exchange. And we flipped the company from India to the US because we wanted to do that in New York Stock Exchange. Suddenly, the market vanished. There was a collapse in the US. Bubble burst, internet bubble. And so we again decided to switch it back to India and do the IPO in India. So in 6 months flat, we flipped it back and we decided to go for an IPO in India. But as we were going for an IPO, our merchant bankers told us that one of the big requirements for an IPO and for you to be successful in your IPO is to have a great backlog of orders. We didn't have that. We were a smaller company. So we came out with a most audacious plan. And this is something, again, which has never been done before. We came up with a concept called customer stock option. So we went to some of our top customers and said, if you give us a $75 million order, we will give you a part of the company before the IPO. So when we go for an IPO, you'll recover all your money. So with that objective, we pitched to about 15, 20 companies. 8 of them agreed to give us a $75 million order. And that got us a great backlog of business with which we went for a listing. Again, we had to do something different. And this is something which I always tell people, don't do the things the way that they look. Do something different. So those days, if you wanted to go for a listing, you needed to give away 25% of your company. And that was not a good situation for a software company. Why should we give up 25% of our equity? So we went and appealed to the government before we went for an IPO and said, please change the rules, because if you want this business to be successful in this country, don't make these conditions of 25%. As we were preparing for an IPO, we managed to get them to agree to 10%. And that's the first time in this country that a software company went for a listing with 10%. We were 23 times oversubscribed on National Stock Exchange. And then started our next journey of exponential growth, which is really why I'm here talking to you about it. With that money, we decided to buy more companies. And in the next 5 to 7 years, we bought close to 17 odd companies all over the world. The whole objective was to get technology. Whole objective was to get customers. Let me step back a little bit. As we were doing all this, we were also looking at another exponential opportunity, which Dr. Ramcharan is very much aware of. He wrote about it in his book, in his early books. We also wanted to be in the telecom business. So we went and applied for a license. We got a license working with a joint, as a joint company with Singapore Telecom. And having got that license, we went back to Singapore Telecom to say, let's start the service business, because it's like Airtel, we wanted to be in the service business. Unfortunately, Singapore Telecom backed out at the last moment. We had the license. So what do? We had dreams of being a telecom company in addition to being a software and hardware company. We couldn't make that dream happen. So again, we went for adjacency. We said, okay, if we can't be in the services business, let's be in the hardware business. So we went to Nokia and said, you guys are not in India. Why don't we start working together and let's create a market? So we brought Nokia to India. Those days, the cost of a phone used to be 16,000 rupees. And the cost of making a call was 16 rupees. So what we did was to create an association, which was called Indian Cellular Association. We founded that association. Because if you want to go to the government and get rules changed, you need an association. So this is all about creating the environment. And I think very importantly in your business, you always need to look at what is the environment, how can you impact the environment, how can you change things. You don't accept status quo. If you accept status quo, you can't succeed in this country. So we decided that we'll get the rules changed. So in the next 3 years, we got all the rules changed. Those days it used to be calling party pays. Can you imagine that? If you made a call, you had to pay for it. So anyway, we got all that changed. The duties got changed, the VAT got changed. And in the meantime, as we were working with Nokia, prices were at 16,000 rupees. And really, I never used to bother about that business. I used to call it the second decimal place business. So anyway, my team one day came in and said, the Nokia team is here, they want to meet you, and they want to look at how we can grow. So I said, okay, I'm willing to come, but I hope they are willing to listen. They said, sure, they are very open, and please come in. So I went and sat with the Nokia team, and we were discussing how to make it happen. I said, look, last 6 years we've been in this business, we've achieved nothing. And unless guys look at a very different price point for India, you'll not succeed. This is a very price-sensitive market. And I gave them examples that with Microsoft we did a special deal, with Oracle we did a special deal, and they have an India price. So why can't you have an India price? So they said, okay, what would be the price in your mind? So I just, out of the blue, said 9,900 rupees. 16,000 to 9,900. So they all balked. Anyway, next 3-4 weeks, they came back and said, sure, let's go ahead. How much will you sell? So we gave them a number. And we sold twice than what we had committed. So 6 months later, they came back and said, let's celebrate. What we've achieved is something which has never been done before. But one major thing we had changed in this country was to distribute the product separately from the service. All over the world, service and product were sold together. We went and took a different view. We said, let's separate the distribution of the product away from the service. We don't want to bundle with Airtel. We'll sell it separately. So we created a huge distribution capability. And we looked at how levers sell soaps. And how levers sell soaps is the model we adopted for selling phones in this country. So we created many redistributor stockists. We got the top stockists of all the FMCG companies. And all of them were very well to do. And we said, we want to stock product there, but we'll give them zero credit. Because if we give them zero credit, they'll be forced to sell more. So as a result of that, we were getting to be very successful. And that's when Nokia came back and said, what should we do next? So I said, next price point should be 6,600. Within the day, they approved 6,600. And we did something quite amazing. We created a model of what I call the ODI model of sales. One day international cricket. I'm going to be watching the final in Dubai the other day. So what did that mean? I said, I gave all my salespeople a daily target. And they had to meet that daily target. So that run rate model is what we started. And we never saw the end of the day with that. Exceedingly successful. We went from 3,000 to 4,000 crores to 8,000 crores in 3 years. That really is exponential growth that Dr. Ramcharan talks about. And this is really what we achieved by doing something different. Let me come back. So here we are. Nokia sends us to watch the Beijing Olympics. So me and my co-founder, Shiv Nadar, we both, with our families, go to watch the Beijing Olympics. And I'd gone to China after about 10, 15 years because I used to market our products in China in the early 80s when it was nothing. So here we are in China, and we look at the Olympics. Amazing. I mean, what China had done for the Olympics was absolutely mind-boggling. So one evening we were sitting with a drink, and suddenly Shiv Nadar gets a call. And he's quite an expressive guy. So suddenly his face changed after the call. And when the call finished, he said, gee, we lost something. I said, what happened? We were bidding for a company in London, and we had bid 800 million pounds. And it is the largest SAP company in UK. And we wanted desperately to have this because that way we could grow much, much faster. And again, this whole idea is about exponential growth. So we had lost it. But then he said, watch this space. That particular day, Narayan Murthy went to the press and announced that they have bought the company. We saw the newspaper cuttings, which were sent to us. Next day, we did again something very audacious. We outbid Infosys. And we bought that company. I always wonder why Infosys never outbid us. So we bought that company, and that really created our software business in a big way. We did many great things like this. We created different businesses in HCL. Unless you innovate, unless you create new businesses, how are you going to grow? So didn't want to be just dependent on our engineering software business. We didn't want to be just dependent on our normal software business. In India, we had actually created an infrastructure business by managing the National Stock Exchange. The whole National Stock Exchange network was managed by us remotely from Delhi. So we took that product to the world market, and we created an infrastructure business. We started managing the infrastructure of large companies all over. That created a completely new business. And then, of course, we went into BPO business. So whole bunch of stuff we were doing. In India, we went to the system integration business, and we created another business of about 8,000 crores. So I think one of the things that I always say, and this is something that I've written in my book, you should spot opportunities when it's noise. In electrical engineering, there's a concept of noise to signal. So at the time of noise is when you should pick up an idea and create a business, not when it's a signal. At the time of signal, everybody else knows also. So if you pick up that business at noise level, you can really grow. So that's how what we kept doing, innovating, creating new businesses, and we created many, many new businesses within the HCL fold. And lastly, what we did was that we started working on creating a brand. Brand is essential. If you want to be successful, you want people to know about you, the brand is very critical. So we did a brand campaign for about 6 years when we actually went and tested the market with full-page ads. We did some terrific 3D films on TV, didn't work. Then we decided to do a campaign which was called the HCL campaign around two people in a television campaign. And there we used emotion, and there we used humor. With that emotion and humor, we created a fantastic campaign which became so successful that in the next 3 years, we were talked about as the #1 brand in our IT industry. So these are a few of the things that you need to do if you want to grow exponentially. You need to take risks. You need to be audacious. You need to think out of the box. You need to innovate constantly. You cannot stay still. In our business, everything changes very, very quickly. And you just cannot be standing there and getting shot at. Okay? Thank you.